Hello, welcome to Contact. I'm Gloria Creighton, and with me today at Anderson's Restaurant is David Blume, one of the co-artistic directors of the Grinning Dragon Theatre Company. Welcome, David.
Hello.
Good to see you.
You too.
I know you must be exhausted because you've just opened a new show.
Yes, just completely fried. I had my very first day off in a month yesterday, and I didn't manage to take it off.
No, because you're here with us.
I'm here with you. Exactly.
Well, we're glad you are, because we're going to hear all about your company. But first, let's talk about the show. What's it called?
It's called Caveman Rainbow. It's a one-woman show that features one of the other artistic directors in the company, Linda Quibell, as a woman coming to terms with breast cancer. But it's not a it's not an educational show per se. It's really a piece of theater. It's quite poetic in places, and it was also attractive to us just because this woman is just a fabulous character. She's quite quirky. She's got an odd sense of humor. She doesn't quite fit in to society in any way, and I think one of the things besides the poetic nature of the play, which appealed to us, was that as she's coming to terms with the cancer, she actually begins to wake up. In effect, it brings her back to life because she's been drifting for a long time. You know, she's in her mid-30s, and she's, as a number of us do, I think she's been on automatic pilot for some of her life. And she also spends time talking about love and death and life and, you know, all those things, all those fun subjects.
Well, very current and popular subject. I just actually heard someone this morning who was diagnosed and is going in for mastectomy, so I should send her to the show. She's got a good attitude about it.
I think this is what's attractive about this is it's not a play about victimization.
No.
It's really a play about learning to live.
That's right, survival.
Yeah, and it's on a double bill with another one-woman show that Jan Derbyshire, who's a stand-up comedian, doing a piece of theater about being a stand-up comedian. So, so two very different aspects about, I guess, women in the '90s. Yeah, and this show was written. Our show was written by actually quite a wonderful Toronto actress named Caroline Gillis, who's who does a lot of work in Toronto with small Canadian companies.
She's great.
Yeah.
How about audience reaction? Do you find, you know, if you have more men in the audience or more women, is there a different kind of reaction to, you know, to that type of subject matter?
We've had a few audiences now, and it's been hard to say because the shows have been quite different. I mean, a one-person show is not like any other show, and this is an incredibly delicate play because there's a lot of humor in it, but it's not a comedy per se. But and of course it's dealing with a very frightening and upsetting subject matter. But if it gets too dark too soon, the whole thing goes out of kilter. So Linda and I found it was very interesting in rehearsal and the first couple times with an audience, walking the tightrope, where you find the lightness to the early part of the piece and the joy that the character has. And then you still are able to take people through this journey. And it seemed to me, the first time we had an audience that was more women than men, they found it less funny, which was interesting. Also on our opening night, a woman came to see the show who we know who's dealing with, I think, lymphatic cancer. And she told me that for the first 20 minutes of the show, she was getting irritated. She was getting irritated by how
lightly they were taking the...
How lightly this woman... Yeah, and I mean, you don't necessarily know, right? In fact, if this interview was coming out before the show opened, I'd be very reluctant to even talk about what the thing's dealing with, because one of the lovely things about the play is you don't really discover till about halfway through what it is she's dealing with. You know there's something going on, but you don't know what it is. And this friend of ours said, you know, that it was sort of bugging her for a while. She was just beginning to get irritated, and then as the play progressed, she started to realize, oh yeah, this is what you do. And she said, I remember doing this as well. You know, I mean, that this woman's sense of humor is one of her coping techniques. You know, and in some ways, I mean, she's dealing with the audience and so on. In some ways, her sense of humor is her way of helping other people deal with it as well.
That's right. Well, they say laughter can cure cancer, actually. You know,
yeah,
humor is very important.
It's definitely a technique. It's definitely a form.
But it's nice, isn't it, to bring about that effect, to do something positive.
It is, you know.
With
I mean,
your work.
This opens up an interesting question that because what art is for.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a big, there's a lot of, I don't know.
Discussion.
I don't think anybody outside the arts community probably cares one way or another, but I know that in the arts community there are debates going on now about whether art has to be useful or not, you know, and it's interesting that in places like Africa, you know, with handcrafted objects of art and so on, there isn't really a distinction made between something that's practical and something that's art, that's meant for art. Yeah, there isn't an arts for art's sake in the, at least in the ancient cultures in Africa, and now there seems to be a social desire that all art has to be in some way useful, and that actually makes me a little nervous, because I think art is useful, but I think we live in such a materialist society that we tend to think that to be useful it has to be, you know, socially relevant, and it has to be addressing an issue and being didactic about it, or you know, and I think sometimes at Grinning Dragon we sometimes swing the other way. We want to go into, you know, spiritual stuff. I mean, Linda, you know, one of the co-artistic directors.
Actually, let's talk about Grinning Dragon Theatre. Okay. What is your mandate? What are you trying to do with the group?
What is our mandate? Yeah. Okay. Don't just ask me the easy ones first. We okay, hold on. I'm just going to digress for a second, and this will make sense.
It's all about your group.
The most exciting thing for me when I come out of a show is if I'm actually looking at the world slightly differently, if I'm seeing it slightly differently, you know, and if the day-to-day suddenly acquires.
And you look to it. You see it from a different perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. If I'm seeing things, or if I'm listening to people differently, if I'm, you know, if I'm hearing the way people talk, and you know, I mean, if I'm awake. And I think that we do sleepwalk a lot of the time. And
most of our society does.
Yeah, and I think most people do. I think, you know, we can only take in so many impressions, so we get in the habit of just going, well, what do I need to look at and to
and we're
function?
also programmed that way with society.
Absolutely, and we are, I think, an incredibly materialistic people, to the point where I think we're quite ill. I mean, I think we really are ill. And ideally, what I would like people to do when they see one of our shows is to actually come in contact again with, this is going to sound very flaky, but with the mythic element of life, you know, the fact that all of our lives actually do have a much greater dimension than we realize, you know, so that whether it's having a child, or whether it's just going to the store to buy groceries and talking to the guy at the grocery store, or doing your work, whatever your work is, there is a level which is more than mundane that can and should be there, you know.
This is very healthy psychologically, is it not?
I think so.
Because we've lost touch with that.
But it often, in order to do this, you sometimes have to go into places that aren't nice. and this is where you get into trouble, both from the left and the right. You get into trouble from the from people who get afraid or offended if you deal with sexual or deviantly, quote, deviantly sexual materials, or if you deal with things that are really ugly. And now from the left, you also get into trouble if you're just, I mean, there seems to be a desire sometimes to legislate kindness, that nobody should ever say bad things about each other, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I think I'm exaggerating, but
we understand.
Yeah. These things do happen.
You actually, on that note, David, you have a history of being very experimental with your group. You know, and at the cost of, you know, making more money and having it easier, you took the hard route. I think, taking chances?
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel a bit pretentious claiming that we're very experimental, but it seems that for Vancouver we're fairly experimental, and I've certainly done myself out of work in the mainstream because I think the perception of me in this town is that I do kind of weird plays, and that's basically because I keep on trying to do plays that I wish I could see, you know, that I don't feel I'm getting a chance to see, and that means very physical and with a lot of language, not necessarily just jabbering the way I tend to jabber, but you know, like we do a lot of classically based work. We do a lot of stuff using Shakespeare, and we're doing a project in the summer later on based on the Greeks.
The Complete Loves.
The Complete Works of Love we did earlier, which we're going to remount, revise and remount, which all the dialogue is taken from everything Shakespeare ever wrote, and it's a story of a man and a woman, and it's their love relationship, but it's sort of meant to be the archetypical.
So it's the archetype, again, your myth coming in.
Myth, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's what is...
Elevating the simple things in life.
Yeah. And what the hell is it between men and women right now? Like, what are we doing? And that's some of the stuff we're exploring in that play. But what am I trying to say here? So we're interested in stuff which is, I think, beyond naturalism. I think I think Canadian actors are the best naturalistic actors in the world, but often our theater is quite limited when it gets out of the realm of naturalism. And
now, when you say we, you're just referring to the two other artistic directors.
For instance, Peter Elliot Weiss, who's quite a well-known playwright, and he's been around for a long time. He wrote The Haunted House Hamlet, which was another attempt to go back to a classic and you know, shuffle it up like a deck of cards. Yeah, exactly. And because it was done in a house where people followed the you know, the actors around and so on, it was an experiment in different staging techniques and so on. And Peter's always been a bit of an iconoclast that way. And he's the gadfly in the company too. Basically, whenever Linda or I come up with ideas, Peter shoots them down very efficiently. He's really good at that.
That's my next question. With three artistic directors, how does it work? I mean, do you argue a lot?
We argue a lot, and Linda and I have known each other for 15 years or so. We went to theater school together. So, you know, when you work with friends, you sometimes don't treat them with the same respect as when you work with strangers. So we do have to periodically during rehearsals turn to, you know, whoever the stage manager or the other actors are and say, no, this is okay, this is normal actually. Or sometimes, sorry, this is actually not appropriate, we've gone too far.
It's kind of sticky, yeah.
Well, because you take liberties with your friends, you know, you always treat strangers and enemies with far more respect. But there's a lot of healthy discussion and arguing that goes on. I mean, we really are. We're trying to redefine what live theater is for us. Why do live theater as opposed to doing movies or television? You know.
Okay, why? I was going to ask you that question later on. We might as well get into it now.
Because it's live.
Yeah.
And it seems to and when I say live, I mean because it's live. And most of the time, I feel both in terms of including my own work. An awful lot of the theater that I see that's meant to be live is just watered down TV. We can't do some of the things that you can do on television and movies. We can't whisk you out to the Grand Canyon or do a helicopter shot or any of those things. But, or usually we can't like bring the thing right up into your face where this little eye movement means everything. And yet, in so many ways, it feels like that's what we're trying to do at the moment on stage.
In theater,
is imitate.
On stage. So you're saying that the Hollywood North idea, the movie business, has had an impact on our local theater?
I think it has, but I think it's much more than that. I think is just the TV watching habits of, you know, I mean, it's amazing when you read new scripts, which I do a lot in various capacities for various companies. How often you're clearly reading scripts that have been written for the theater by people who have never seen theater. Whose entire basis is film and television, and that's you know, that's an okay place to start. But
do you think, David, too, from an audience point of view, that people are becoming impatient? Everything has to be fast, visual. The news, 2-minute, 1-minute clips, and that sitting and listening to rich text is difficult for them.
I feel like a salmon. We're definitely swimming upstream, right? and it's yeah, you're absolutely right. People sometimes react to the idea of a text-driven play with complex ideas like, oh, that's going to be work. And they're right.
Yeah.
It is going to be work. It is work.
Work and less money.
Work and less money. But I mean, for the audience, they feel like it's going to be work.
For the audience, yeah.
And sometimes they're right there, too. But I mean, I think, you know, one of the things, the difference between being an audience member in a live event and in a filmed event is that you actually influence what's going on. You are very much a part of the action. People aren't always aware of how much a part of the action they are. You will change what's up on stage. The act of observation changes the event.
So you haven't been lured by the money angle of the movie work?
Oh, I'm lured. I just don't. I don't get a lot of that work. I mean, I'm quite ready to sell my soul, but nobody's buying.
Oh, finally. You haven't in all the years.
I've done a few TV. I've done a little bit of local television, and I've done a couple of film things. Not a lot, and I don't feel like because I love this one thing that I have to despise that. And I certainly would not object to making a better living than I do. But I don't put my focus in it.
No, so you've got your company now, and your director, playwright, AD.
Yeah, and
so
And my heart is in live theater, for sure. So I mean, I've no one to blame but myself for the fact that I'm not going out all the time for movie roles, because, you know, I'm focused all the time, and you know, my poor agent, you know, will phone me up and say, "Can you go out tomorrow for, you know?" And I'd say,
No, I've got a rehearsal. I've got a play that I'm working on.
Yeah, exactly.
There's 3 or 4 projects coming up, which we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah. So
What is life like as an artistic director? I mean, a lot of people aren't aware of the responsibilities and the work that's involved.
Well, it depends, you know, and it's very different
With
a company like Grinning Dragon.
Grinning
We're a very, very small company,
Yeah.
And we have very little money. Like, we're project based, which means we don't get funded to just we don't get funded for office staff, for instance. All the administrative work is done by the company members, unpaid at the moment. Which gets in the way of our efficiency, and you know, I find myself writing grant applications when I should be writing plays, doing the
Putting
doing
up
office
posters.
work.
Do you find
I
that?
used to do a lot of that. We're getting away from having to do as much of that, but we're still doing a lot of work which we're not necessarily temperamentally inclined to. And
I think most companies, local theater and dance companies, are in the same situation.
a lot of
these days.
the small companies,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, obviously, you know, people like Bill Millard and Susan Cox are going to have other responsibilities which are also grueling and so on, in order to be the artistic directors of their companies. They're dealing with, you know, multi-million-dollar budgets occasionally. So they have other responsibilities. But basically for us, it's a lot of time is spent on survival and just trying to get the money together to do the next show, and we're trying to have an overall vision of what the company's for, so that everything is contributing to a growth, and you know, so that 5 years from now, if we say Grinning Dragon, people will have a sense, oh, they do a kind of work which I can identify by calling it Grinning Dragon work, for instance, you know.
Why is this happening now in Vancouver? The artistic climate is difficult for artists. I mean, I keep hearing this. Singers, actors,
It's always been hard in
dance.
Vancouver.
Yeah, more so these days.
More so these days.
70s, there was more happening.
Yeah, in the 70s,
Yeah.
you know, the old joke was, get me a lip grant while you're up,
Yeah.
you know.
And I mean, times are tougher. It's the 90s, times are tougher. But still, the arts always seem to be at the bottom of the, you know, the financial ladder. Is there a solution to that you see, having had your company for years?
I don't know, and I think me answering that question, honestly, is the kind of thing that gets me in trouble in this town, but I think partly it's our own fault. I think one of the reasons that people don't think of the theater as an exciting place to go is that very often we do boring work. And I think, I know a lot of people in the business look at going to the theater often as a chore, and we're just so delighted when we once again get, you know, once or twice a year, I see a show that reminds me, that's why I'm in this business, that's why I do this, because something like that. And maybe every couple of years, it actually gets to be the thing that I'm working on, you know, that other people are going, thank God you did that, that's why I'm in theater, you know. But as there's this spiral that goes back as there's less and less money, and people get more and more afraid. They try and second guess the audiences. So instead of doing the work that they love and that they really
believe in and they have the talent for it.
Yeah, they're trying to do the work that they think people want.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of that happening.
I think we're in a real crisis. I think the theater community in Vancouver is in a real crisis, that very few companies really know why they're doing what they're doing anymore, and it's very hard for any of them to stop long enough to really reevaluate, because they're just in survival mode. So there's a kind of a siege mentality.
It's tough. It's tough out there.
I don't know how, and I don't really know what the answer to that is. I mean, our solution is to try and, we made the decision that we were not going to do ever a season, a quote, you know, like say, well, we have to do this many shows in the next season, what shows are we going to do?
Then you probably push into a compromise situation of that you've got a grant and you've got to justify it. And
Exactly. Yeah. So instead, that's why we are project-based, is, no, we're doing this show, we're putting this show up because we believe this show is important, you know, and so that we always want to do work out of love, you know. Not all, I mean, you know, some of the bigger companies can't work that way now.
Now, you've been an actor also. I mean, you're very skilled in different areas, writer, playwright, director, and actor. You're not doing any of that now. Do you miss it?
I do a little. I got to act in a piece that I wrote in the KISS project that Judith Marcus Dance Company did.
Was that a high for you, acting again?
Well, acting is almost like a holiday for me now, because usually when I'm acting, I'm doing it for another company, so I don't have to do administration work, and I just get to go in there and be an actor, and I'm also only responsible for my own work. And when
What a
I was,
luxury.
Well, you know, I don't want to say this around other actors because I don't mean to demean the incredible work that especially people who are full-time actors, you know, it's one of the most stressful jobs in the world, bar none. And they're you know, outside of the audience, they're the only people who are indispensable in the theater. I mean, you can do it without directors and you can do it without designers. You can even do it without writers if you have certain kinds of actors.
Or lighting.
Or lighting, all that stuff, but you can't do it without actors. But because when I started as an actor, everything was bound up in acting, I would be so stressed when I was working that, you know, it all mattered so much and I was so tense and so wired. And now that that it's not the whole
Your main
focus.
Yeah.
I actually really, I love it now because it's, I can go up there and if I fail, I'm just going to fail. And it's not going to be the end of my life.
You're
or my
David Blume,
career.
the director now.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, he's not expected to be a good actor. He's a director. So I think I'm a much better actor than I used to
Isn't
be.
that
as a result.
interesting? Some people try too hard. That's not good.
You know, it's a real, because there are also people who don't work.
Yeah.
You know, some very naturally talented people who don't work that hard, and they get into ruts really quickly too. So you have to work very hard and become very disciplined to learn how to not work.
Yeah.
It's and I don't have the answer to that yet because I'm still a pup. I'm only 35. but I'm beginning to realize more and more that discipline is about taking away. It's about removing the barriers to working, and that's where it's really that's actually very, very hard. But the ultimate result is usually simple. And simplicity.
If we could all just reach that, you know, if there was a short route to that, to achieve that state,
then, you know,
wouldn't that be nice?
Then there wouldn't be any need for life, and the wheel of karma would all end, and we'd all be in heaven.
That's right, David. You spent many years making actually lucrative living as a fight choreographer.
Well, I wouldn't say lucrative because it was still theater, but yeah, I used to when the bulk of my work was acting and fight choreography. I usually lived comfortably below the poverty line, and that was how people perceived me. I mean, that was for a long time. It was like, oh, that's Blume. He's a fight choreographer and he acts.
Do you find people tend to, you know, typecast and slot you in little roles?
Oh, yes, in this profession, people really like to do that. I mean, especially in film and TV, it's like, oh, he's that type.
Type, right.
But the whole business is about slotting people, which is so funny because I think also the work is about digging below the surface, but people like a shorthand, and now that I'm directing, people don't think of me as an actor. And I think some people don't want a director in their production anyway because they're afraid that they'll start going,
That's
oh,
right.
I can do this better. Yeah. Which is, actually, in my experience, people who direct as well as actor are often really easy to work with as actors because they have some sympathy for the director.
I would think so. More empathy and understanding. Absolutely.
I know what panic they're going through. It's like, oh, okay, I'll just go deal with this on my own. I'll leave you alone now.
So as a director, do you work a lot with other companies, or is it because it's tight now? Do most ADs direct their own plays?
In Vancouver, well, all across the country, there are about maybe 5% of the people who are directors or considered directors do about 90% of the work. So, in fact, I do a lot of work with other companies as a director, but not much in Vancouver. In Vancouver, I'm in the ghetto of the small companies.
Yeah, and you've worked all over Canada, though, you know, with major companies directing and that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of speed you up because the time goes by so quickly here, so don't mind me.
That's okay. I talk too much anyway.
No, that's great. I wanted to talk about your upcoming projects.
Yes.
We should talk about.
Definitely.
You've got several coming up.
I'm finally directing a show at the school that I studied in, like that I graduated from 15 or 16 years ago.
Studio 58.
Yeah.
Yes.
A play by a person who recently graduated, Marvin Kay, and they're doing 4 one-act plays, all by current students and graduates, and the directors are also include other graduates because Bob Metcalf is directing one of the other ones,
Lovely.
and he's turning into a very fine director.
The play is?
The play is
something
called
about Mayonnaise.
That's right. They have Mayonnaise in Montreal, and it's actually a very naturalistic family drama about a father and son difficulty communication. I mean, it's a classic story. It's a Jewish family, Winnipeg Jewish family.
Which is nice because you have a Jewish background.
I have a Jewish background, and I'm finally this year all of a sudden directing plays with Jewish
There's another
themes.
Jewish one coming up.
The one after that, The Puppet Master of Lodz, which is really this affects me a lot, this play, because it deals with the Holocaust, and it's about a man who is a puppet. He was a puppet master before World War II. It's 1950. He was in a camp, he escaped from a camp, and from 1945 to 1950, he's been locked in this one room, and he refuses to come out, and he refuses to believe that the war is over. And he's there with his puppets creating a show, and people are trying to get him to come out.
This is going to be a difficult one for you.
Well, I have to admit, I've put off some of the research because I know some of the things that I'm going to have to go back and look at.
And it's an interesting time too, because
it's the 50th anniversary.
50th anniversary, and also to doing both of these Jewish plays, and also it's a kind of a cycle in your life, or a passage, because you are going to have a child in a couple of months.
Yes, I'm not going to do the hard part.
No, you're not going to do the hard part, but you still are. It's yours. Yeah.
Yes, Kate King, my
Yeah.
Well, what's the current term?
Partner.
Partner. I hate that. It sounds so
partner in life.
clinical.
Well,
partner,
you
wife,
have to
whatever.
come up with another one.
With another one.
No, I said partner in life.
In life, yeah. Anyhow, that's right. She's having a child in August, and I'm booked up massively right up until practically until the birth, and so is she. She's a very, very busy designer, and a brilliant one. And so it is very interesting suddenly going back into roots material.
That's
for me,
right, roots
basically.
material that you probably haven't touched on before.
No, I haven't done work that directly touches on, for instance, the Holocaust, although, my father was a scientist and my mother converted to Judaism when they got married, but was very secular, so I was raised in a very non-religious environment, but I discovered when I was quite young that I feel very Jewish when that subject comes up.
It's amazing how roots and the past comes at us, isn't it?
Yeah, and as I've said to people who say, you're not really Jewish because you don't practice it, as well, I would have been Jewish enough for Hitler,
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a big subject.
So it's going to be a big year for you, David, and on that note, our time is up.
Wow.
Told you it would go quickly, that we wouldn't get to cover everything we talked about, but that's another interview.
Okay, good.
Get some rest, get some quiet time
Thank you.
and with all these projects, and we'll look for your writing and directing in place all over.
Great.
And for that new baby coming up in August.
That's scary.
Take care.
You too. Thank you. Nice meeting you.
I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank Andersons for providing this lovely setting for the interviews. For contact employer Creighton, please join us next time.